The helicopter blade sliced through the air above us as I watched Sarah's hand slip from mine, her body disappearing beneath the churning waves. I lunged forward, but strong arms pulled me back into the rescue basket. "We can't lose you too," the Coast Guard shouted over the roar. As we lifted away from the wreckage of our small charter plane, I stared down at the empty ocean where my boss had vanished. Except she hadn't vanished at all. The truth of what really happened on that island would haunt me forever. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional survival stories that explore the complex relationships we forge in the most desperate circumstances. 3 months earlier, I was just Daniel Cooper, a 32-year-old marketing executive at Horizon Innovations, sitting in my cubicle and staring at the clock. 5:58 p.m. 2 minutes until freedom. My weekend plans consisted of takeout and catching up on sleep, nothing exciting, but at least it wasn't work. Cooper, my office. Now. Sarah Winters, CEO of Horizon Innovations, stood at my cubicle entrance, her tailored navy suit as crisp as her tone. At 38, she'd built the company from nothing into a marketing powerhouse, earning both admiration and fear from everyone who worked for her. Including me. "Yes, Ms. Winters," I said, following her down the hallway while my coworkers shot me sympathetic glances. Inside her corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Seattle skyline, gray clouds threatening rain. Sarah sat behind her desk, sliding a folder toward me. "The Bali account. We're losing them." My stomach dropped. The Bali tourism campaign was our biggest client, worth millions. But the numbers looked good last quarter. They were. Now they're not. She fixed me with those intense green eyes. "I'm flying to their headquarters tomorrow. You're coming with me." Not a question. A statement. Tomorrow? But it's... I know it's Saturday, Cooper. I'm aware of how calendars work. She almost smiled. Almost. Pack for a week. The company jet leaves at 6 a.m. And that was how I found myself on a small charter plane the next day, flying over the Indian Ocean with Sarah Winters, the woman known throughout the industry as the Ice Queen. The woman who'd never learned my first name in 3 years of employment. The first few hours were silent except for the drone of engines and the occasional instruction from Sarah to review another section of the proposal. Outside the window, endless blue stretched in all directions. "You've never been to Bali?" she asked suddenly, surprising me. "No. Never left the States, actually." She raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? With your talent for cultural marketing?" I shrugged, uncomfortable with both the compliment and the personal question. "Never had the time or money, I guess." She nodded, returning to her laptop. But something had shifted. A tiny crack in the professional wall between us. That crack widened into an abyss when the plane's engine sputtered. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ms. Winters, Mr. Cooper, we're experiencing some mechanical difficulties. Nothing to worry about, but we're going to make an emergency landing." Sarah's knuckles whitened around her armrest, but her face remained calm. "Where exactly are we landing?" "There's nothing but ocean." The pilot's hesitation told us everything. "There's a small island about 10 miles south. We should make it." Should. Not would. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. The plane dipped and shuddered. Warning lights flashed. The pilot and co-pilot shouted technical terms I didn't understand. Sarah and I exchanged one long look, and I saw something I never expected: fear. When we hit the water, the impact threw me against my seatbelt. Cold water rushed in. Somehow, I unbuckled myself, then Sarah. We swam through the flooding cabin and out the emergency exit. The pilots weren't as lucky. We watched from the water as our plane sank beneath the waves, taking with it our pilots, our communication devices, and any hope of immediate rescue. "Swim," Sarah gasped, pointing to a green smudge on the horizon. Island. The swim nearly killed us both. By the time we dragged ourselves onto the white sand beach, the sun was setting, and we collapsed side by side, coughing up seawater and gasping for breath. We made it, I wheezed. Sarah didn't answer. She just stared at the darkening sky, her usually perfect hair plastered to her face, her expensive suit ruined by saltwater. That first night, we huddled under a makeshift shelter of palm fronds, shivering despite the tropical air. Neither of us spoke about the pilots or the fact that no one knew exactly where we were. Instead, we focused on surviving until morning. "They'll find us," Sarah said, more to herself than to me. "The company will notice when we don't arrive." I nodded, though we both knew the search area would be vast. The charter company had filed a flight plan, but we drifted off course before crashing. Dawn revealed our new reality, a small island, perhaps a mile across, with a beach ringing a jungle interior and a rocky hill at its center. No sign of human habitation. No fresh water immediately visible. "We need to find water," Sarah said, standing up and brushing sand from her torn slacks. "Then shelter. Then something to signal passing ships or planes." I was surprised by her practical approach. "You seem to know what you're doing." "I grew up camping with my father," she said, already walking toward the tree line. "He was a marine biologist. Taught me a few things about survival." This was more personal information than she'd shared in 3 years of working together. I followed her into the jungle, seeing her in an entirely new light. The first week was about survival. We found a freshwater spring bubbling from rocks near the center of the island. We built a more substantial shelter. We learned to catch fish with makeshift spears and found edible fruits in the jungle. Each night, we maintained a signal fire on the beach, taking turns to keep it burning. And we talked. Really talked, for the first time. "Why marketing?" Sarah asked one night, as we sat by the fire, watching sparks drift up to join the stars. "I like understanding what moves people," I said. "What makes them want things. What stories they tell themselves." She nodded. "That's why I hired you. Your campaigns don't just sell products, they tell stories people want to be part of. Is that why you started Horizon?" She poked at the fire with a stick. "I started Horizon because I was tired of men taking credit for my ideas." She glanced at me. "No offense. None taken. But yes, I believe in the power of narrative. The right story can change everything." By the second week, we'd established a routine. Mornings for gathering food and water. Afternoons for improving our shelter and maintaining signal fires. Evenings for conversation. I learned that Sarah had sacrificed everything for her company, relationships, family, even her health at times. She learned that I'd once dreamed of being a writer before settling for what I thought was a more practical career. "You should write," she said. "When we get back. Life's too short for practical." "When we get back," I echoed, though doubt had begun to creep in. No planes had flown overhead. No ships had passed close enough to see our signals. The third week brought a tropical storm that nearly destroyed our shelter. We huddled together as rain lashed the island and winds bent the palm trees almost to breaking. "I'm sorry," Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely audible above the storm. "For what?" "For bringing you here. For being such a demanding boss. For not even knowing your favorite color after 3 years." I laughed despite everything. "It's blue. And you don't need to apologize. You built an amazing company. At what cost, though?" She looked at me, really looked at me. "What good is success if you're alone when the storms come?" Something changed between us that night. The professional boundaries that had survived even a plane crash finally dissolved in the face of our shared vulnerability. As weeks turned into a month, we settled into a new kind of life. We expanded our shelter into a surprisingly comfortable hut. We crafted better tools. We even found a way to make a kind of tea from local leaves. And we grew closer. The CEO and the marketing executive disappeared, replaced by just Sarah and Daniel, two people fighting to survive, finding unexpected joy in simple things. A perfect sunrise. A successful fish catch. The discovery of a hidden cove with crystal clear water. I never thought I could live like this, Sarah admitted one evening as we watched the sunset from our favorite spot on the rocky hill. So, disconnected. From what? Everything. Emails. Meetings. Quarterly reports. She smiled. It's terrifying. And also strangely liberating. I understood. Despite the constant challenges and the underlying fear that we might never be rescued, there was something pure about our existence on the island. No pretense. No politics. Just honest work and honest conversation. 6 weeks after the crash, as we sat on the beach watching another day end with no sign of rescue, Sarah asked the question that would change everything. If no one comes? She said quietly, will you stay? I looked at her, surprised. Stay? Here. With me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I know it sounds crazy. But I've never felt more real than I do right now. The question hung between us, impossible and yet somehow perfect. Before I could answer, she leaned forward and kissed me, tentatively at first, then with a certainty that took my breath away. That night, under a canopy of stars brighter than any city sky, we crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. CEO and employee ceased to exist. We were just two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of places. I would stay, I told her later, as we lay side by side in our shelter. If that's what you wanted. She smiled in the darkness. What I want has changed so much since we came here. The next morning, we began building something more permanent than a shelter. A home. We talked about the future, not the one back in Seattle with meetings and deadlines, but one here, on our island. It was fantasy, perhaps, but it sustained us. 2 months after the crash, we spotted it, a ship on the horizon. Without discussion, we lit our signal fire, waving branches to create smoke signals. Part of me felt relief. Another part felt something like regret. They're turning this way, Sarah said, shading her eyes against the sun. They've seen us. I took her hand. Are you ready to go back? She didn't answer immediately. I don't know if I can be who I was before. You don't have to be. The rescue happened quickly after that. A passing cargo vessel. A radio call. A helicopter from the nearest military base. Suddenly, we were surrounded by people, answering questions, being examined by medics. You're lucky to be alive, one rescuer told us. Most people wouldn't have survived this long. But we had done more than survive. We had discovered something neither of us had been looking for. As the helicopter lifted us away from the island, Sarah leaned close to me. I meant what I said. About not going back to who I was. I know, I said. Me too. The media called it a miracle. The business world marveled at how Horizon had continued to thrive under interim leadership. Our story made headlines, CEO and employee survive 2 months on deserted island. What the headlines didn't capture was the truth of what had happened between us. How we had both been stripped down to our essentials and rebuilt into something new. How we had found, in the absence of everything familiar, something neither of us knew we were looking for. 6 months after our rescue, Sarah sold Horizon Innovations. The business world was shocked. I wasn't. What will you do now? A reporter asked her at the press conference. She smiled, a real smile, not the polished corporate version. Live, she said simply. Just live. That evening, as we packed our bags for a flight the next morning, she handed me a small box. Inside was a piece of coral, polished smooth, from our island. A reminder, she said. Of what's real. I held it, feeling its weight. Do you ever regret being rescued? She considered this. No. But I'm grateful for every day we weren't. Our new home isn't on a deserted island. It's a small house on the coast of New Zealand, far from corporate headquarters and marketing campaigns. Sarah consults occasionally. I write the stories I always wanted to tell. And sometimes, when the modern world becomes too much, we look at each other and remember a simple shelter, a signal fire, and a question asked in the darkness: if no one comes, will you stay? The answer, it turns out, was never about staying on the island. It was about staying true to what we discovered there, that the life you plan isn't always the life you're meant to live. That sometimes, you have to lose everything to find what matters. That sometimes, being stranded is the only way to truly be found. The helicopter blades sliced through the air above us as I watched Sarah's hand slip from mine, her body disappearing beneath the churning waves. I lunged forward, but strong arms pulled me back into the rescue basket. We can't lose you too, the Coast Guard shouted over the roar. But that's not how our story ended. That was just my nightmare, the one that still wakes me sometimes, even years later. The truth is both simpler and more profound. Two people crashed on an island, and in losing the world they knew, they found each other. Not just as boss and employee, not just as lovers, but as partners in the truest sense, two people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and chosen to stay. If there's a message in our story, it's this: sometimes the greatest journeys aren't about the distance traveled, but about the distances between people that disappear when everything else is stripped away. And if you're wondering if it was worth it, all the fear, the struggle, the uncertainty, I'll tell you what Sarah tells me whenever I ask if she misses her old life. Some people spend their whole lives on islands of their own making, surrounded by everything except what truly matters. We were lucky. We got stranded together.